for coming, and thank you very much to our panel up here who I've been emailing back and forth, and they're kind of wondering who's this crazy lady that keeps sending me stuff. But we wanted to get, first of all, notice they're all moving, they're all live. So again, Historical Society, live people. Yes, just letting you know, we're trying to get into the modern day world here. And notice, we have an age range up here. They're not all my color hair. They're younger and better looking and probably smarter than I ever was. So this is pretty cool. This really came from, I was in Leadership Delaware a couple years ago, and Leadership Delaware did an agricultural tour, and they start out the day with a panel discussion, and then they tour various farms and see how agriculture has changed in the county. So when we talked about this whole thing, I said we need to do a panel discussion because you can't just have like agriculture, history of agriculture, because so many things are changing, and farming and agriculture is changing, and the county's changing. So that's why we wanted to get the panel discussion together, and it's kind of the preamble for all the other things that we're going to be doing for the rest of the year. So before we get started, I was going to introduce all these wonderful people, and then I thought, you've heard enough of me talking, so let's start down with Jacci, and they can introduce themselves.
So my name is Jacci Smith, and I am the 4-H and Ag educator here at the Extension Office in Delaware County. So I've been in that position for about 10 years. I also was born on a farm in northern Union County and married into a farm in Cardington, Morrow County area. So I just kind of live, breathe agriculture of all kinds, agronomy, but sheep are my thing, my specialty.
I'm Doug Dawson. I'm a third generation farmer. Live in Brown Township, just east of Delaware. Raise hogs. Got a wonderful wife of 45 years and 3 children and 5 grandchildren.
Doug, how many acres are you farming?
What?
How many acres are you farming?
We farm about 2,000 acres. It's a part-time business. We raise hogs is our main business.
Hogs are the main business, and part-time, 2,000 acres. Whoa! Brian.
My name's Brian Skinner, and I'm a cog in the wheel of our family farm, also in Brown Township. Doug and I keep an eye on each other there daily, just about. Fortunate to still get to work with my mom and my dad. They're a part of it, and as well as my nephew and my brother. So I'm a 5th generation farmer, so Zane would be our 6th.
Very cool.
My great-great-great-grandfather was the first permanent settler in Brown Township, and my grandsons will be the 8th generation farming here in Delaware County. My name's Mary Fleming. I grew up on a farm in Oxford Township where we had a dairy herd, fair to finish hogs, and about 1,500 acres in cropland. There were 5 daughters who did virtually anything that needed done on the farm. When I married, my husband and I were milking 150 cows, Jerseys, when the average herd was about 25 cows. We shipped cattle to Japan, Costa Rica, Brazil, and 5 other international sites. Today, my sons run the farm operation. We have freezer beef, we have market goats, we do about 500 acres of cropland, and a couple hundred acres of hay.
Very cool. Cameron.
Yeah, I'm Cameron James. I'm a 6th generation grain farmer. We farm about 2,000 acres in Radnor Township. I'm also a Radnor Township trustee up there, and I'm also a deputy sheriff for Marion County. So I stay pretty busy. Yeah, it's a little bit about myself.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yes, I'm Rob Leeds. I've been training Jacci as my replacement now for 10 years. She's not ready to take over anytime now. But we also have an agritourism farm out by Ostrander that we started in, I guess we bought the farm in '94. Been a while now. And we also have a row crop operation around Milford Center, if you know where that's at. That's where I grew up. Mom and Dad's farm, they bought, they passed away here a couple of years ago, so we've kind of taken that over. And we also have a boar goat operation. We sell some club goats and some different things like that. But probably the agritourism is probably takes up the most time along with extension.
Very cool, thank you very much. The handouts that are on the chairs, Jackie did those, because we wanted to do a little bit of comparison of then and now, because we are talking about agriculture young today and tomorrow. And so I want to run this like a panel discussion, so I'm going to draw some questions, and whoever gets to the microphone first can answer, or if you have somebody that can get you the answers. Let's talk about it a while ago, like in the 1970s when Jackie's stuff started. Jackie, you want to give us some idea of how many acres and what was happening in 75? Is that what year you did?
Yeah, I went back to 1975, so that was 50 years ago. So there was 1,500 farms with 200,000 acres of in farm ground here in Delaware County. So these are all Delaware County specific numbers. So if you do that math, that average size is 146 acres per farm. It was kind of the average back in 1975. And I want to give a shout out to Rob and whoever else was in our office before Rob. We are able to get the Ohio agriculture stats online right now, but they can only go back, 10 years, Rob? I think online.
Right, yeah, they just.
But someone had the forethought to save them when they came out in the paper copies. So we actually have back to 1961 in our back storage.
And you wouldn't throw them out when we moved. I told you.
And we didn't throw them out when we moved last year, right? So I was able to kind of go back and reference these. So this is something that does come out yearly from the state of Ohio and from USDA to kind of give all of these stats through here. And I thought it was really cool before I even opened it. Whoever was in the office back then had already went through and read underlined Delaware in all of the pages, so it was really cool.
Very cool.
Really easy for me to find. But we had, if you look down through there, we had quite a bit of livestock in the county back then. You want to say something about that? We had livestock back then.
Yeah, a lot of livestock in this
Yeah,
county.
so you can kind of look back and down through there. Do you want me to go ahead and jump into some crop types too, or you want to wait?
Well, let's do some. So, talk about farming back in like 50 years ago, or back in 1975. What was happening in those days? Doug, you're smiling.
I was 16 years old.
Okay.
Sophomore in high school, rented my first farm when I was 16 years old, 20 acres. Actually, Dad let me rent it from a neighbor that he was already farming. And, the numbers are there. The corn yields, if you got 100 bushel, you were very happy. And it says on there $2.45 a bushel. And David shaking his head back there. I sold corn for $1.99 or $1.90 sometime while I was in high school, and he probably sold corn for $1.50.
$1.10.
Yeah. And but the tractors didn't have cabs. We didn't have auto steer. They were lucky to have flashing lights moving up and down the road. Now the nice thing for Boattown Road, there was 20 cars went up and down that road in 1975, and I knew who was in every one of them. Today, there's 25 cars go by there in a minute, and I don't know hardly any of them. The neighbors wave. The ones that don't wave, they don't know. But, my dad, I don't know, we were farming 400, 500 acres. We had hogs. I had a few sows. I'll go ahead and just say how the hog production has changed.
Okay.
I was telling Brian, a tractor, I think my dad bought a new tractor in 75 with a cab, with air conditioning and heat. And I think it was $25,000. If you bought that 150 horse tractor today, it'd be close to $200,000.
Wow.
And you could work on them back then yourself. Now, if you don't have a computer, it's like a car, forget it. But the sows, we have sows, produce baby pigs, and back then a sow would lay down and have 10 live pigs, 11 live pigs, you were happy. They would wean. Weaning means when we took them away 3 weeks after they were born, 8.5. Today we have 1,400 sows. We have 800 pigs born every week, and our average number born alive is 14 and a half to 15. And the weaning average right now is 13.
Wow.
We averaged, in 2024, we averaged 12.6 pigs on every sow that gave birth. And I mean, that's all through genetics and breeding. There's no hormones, growth hormones, no hormones used in the swine production. That was all just by, a guy there's 4 major breeds in the hog industry, and it was just a combination. When I started in hog production and FFA in the 70s, we were shipping a lot of genetics to England. Well, then in the 90s, they had propagated them, and a lot of those genetics came back, and that's how we have just, back then our average weight going to market is 205 pounds. Today it's probably 285 pounds.
Did they talk funny when they came back?
They talk funny when they came back.
They had an English accent, right, too. And that's all through genetics.
Oh, it's genetics, it's feed, it's management.
Okay. Better management, better, okay.
I mean, it used to take 4 pounds of feed to put 1 pound of lean meat on a pig in the 70s. Today it takes 2.3.
Wow.
Used to take 7 months to get them to 200 pounds. We have them today in 6 months of age weighing 285.
Wow.
It's, and with, the hog industry, all the livestock industry, we've all gotten, farmers have always had to be efficient. It's never been something that, hey, I'm going to get in this and be rich, because if you did not use proper management, you are not going to survive. And you got to weather the $1.10 corn.
My sense is that the grain farming is the same, that you guys started out, like in the 70s, you probably were on a tractor that you had to steer, and it didn't go by itself, and you couldn't sit in India and watch on your iPad as a way.
Certain days you had to wear goggles and a mask.
Brian, how long have you been doing this?
Well, I was a 4-year-old in 1975. I still have a
But you
couple.
were still doing it.
I have a couple memories there, but one that's pretty vivid even then. And I don't know if Bowtown was, but we lived on a gravel road, complete gravel road, and then, of course, that would not be good today. But they used to spray oil on the roads to calm the dust down. But on one aspect, you could go on, but thinking about the transportation of being a grain farm, but I missed all that era. But I think Dad mentioned that when he was a kid, we still have that wagon, he'd haul 100 bushel of grain in here to the Delaware Farmers Exchange with a tractor and a wagon that would also periodically would bale hay, you can stack it on there. So, but of course today you're hauling 1,000 bushels, give or take, a load on a paved road. But we're also, a lot of those are going to markets that are out of state, Cincinnati, Fostoria. We have a lot of dedicated markets that we can push it farther. And back in the day, they probably used the rail system and all. So that's changed even in the 40 years or so that I can remember.
I can remember taking livestock to Ashley, Ohio to get on the rail cars. When I look at the space where those stalls were, I can't imagine there were buildings and stalls for livestock in that tiny space between the street and the railroad there on the south side of Ashley. But I remember taking livestock up there that went on the rail cars out of Ashley, Ohio to market. We did a lot of things on the farm as young ladies because we didn't have brothers. I asked my dad eventually if that was because he thought women should be able to do anything, or if it was because I didn't have any brothers. And Dad had this Cheshire cat grin. He looks at me, he says, well, I didn't see any reason you girls couldn't do what needed done. And I didn't have any boys either, so you guys did what needed done on the farm. We didn't have cabs on the tractors. We did have a heat houser that was supposed to make it a little bit warmer, But I can tell you, it was real cold driving 20 miles down the road, hauling grain in gravity bed wagons that were so much smaller than what we haul grain in today. When Bob and I married, and that was in the late 70s, we actually were moving the cattle across the highway twice a day to put them out to pasture and then bringing them back in the barn to milk them. At that point in time, there wasn't that much traffic on Old State Road north of Henneck. Some of you might know where Henneck is. And we literally would stop traffic to put the cattle across the road and back to the pasture after we milked them. When the blizzard hit, the drift covered the road, covered the parlor. We didn't lose power, and Bob milked 150 cows by himself for 4 days. I was a nurse at OSU Hospital in Columbus at the time. So in the 70s, I was a teenager in early 75, but I was already in nursing school. I was raising a flock of sheep on the home farm. That helped pay my way through nursing school when I sold the Weathers every year. I sold 45 ewes when I finally sold the flock of sheep. The dairy was my special interest, the Jersey, so we were showing at State Fair, and the national show was here in Columbus. And in 1977, I believe, in the 70s, there was a big fire at the State Fairgrounds, and my cow was there at the State Fairgrounds. That was quite an experience. 3 barns completely gone in 15 minutes. It was amazing to see how fast that fire went through the barn. Fortunately, my cow and I made it out alive. There were some cows that didn't make it. There were a lot of people treated in the ER. It was quite an experience to be involved in agriculture and go to that national show. There were cows from all over the country at that show here in Columbus, Ohio.
Very cool, very cool. You're not old.
I wasn't alive.
You're not old enough.
They struggled, and I just wasn't even born yet.
What about you?
Yeah, but I'm about like Doug. I was in high school there in '75, and when I think back about the differences between now and then, a couple things jump to mind. First of all, we talked about the equipment and the comfort level. And I know in '72 we bought an open station 4630 because Dad didn't like a cab because it was hard to stay awake in those things because it was just too comfortable. And to drown out the engine noise when we didn't wear earplugs, we turned the radio up real loud so we could hear the radio. Safety as far as ear protection was not a thing at all. We finally did buy a cab tractor in '76, 4630. But those comfort levels were really different back then. The other thing I remember quite a bit too is we all mow-board plowed back in the '70s, and we worked that ground. I remember working the ground twice before Dad came to plant it. We'd work it once, and then we'd hit it another time with chemical and work it in, and then he'd come back and plant it. A lot of that to do with the chemistry we were using back in those days, and back then we were using gallons, now we're using ounces, and it's really changed a lot. And environmental responsibility really kicked in there in the mid '80s, and really has come to today. Very different. Doug and Brian's already mentioned the changes in yield, and it's interesting. Corn yields have changed a lot, but soybean yields, I don't know about you and Brian, soybeans haven't jumped near as much as corn. It has over the last,
Probably has maybe doubled.
right, yeah. But corn is just unbelievable. And once again, the prices, back in the '70s, if you look at it, when I did my dissertation, I was looking at the prices through the '70s, and it's been a long time ago, so don't quote me on the prices. But the mid '70s is when prices really jumped up. And then they bottomed back out again as we went to the '80s. That's why we had the farm crisis, because everybody was banking on these high yield or high gains. That's because we were getting a lot of exports back then. Then we got into the '80s, and all of a sudden things changed and people got into some hardships. But those mid '70s, farm income and stuff wasn't too bad back in those days. But we spent a lot of time on inputs and getting the ground ready that we don't do today at all.
Talk about today. Is it the technology that's made a difference, or the farmers have gotten smarter in doing things, or both, or what?
All the above.
All of the above?
Well, people like Cameron came along. See, it's
Yes, Russ.
and Brian, sorry.
All I heard was about the 80s. That's all I heard about the 80s.
Oh.
And Cameron, that's what I told him. I said, we can't talk about the 75 and then not talk about the 80.
Yeah.
We can't not talk about the 80.
The high interest rates in the 80s was probably the, combination with low prices. They had driven, because of the good prices in the 70s, anytime, it doesn't matter what business you're in, anytime you make money in a business, you get a little bit goofy and, oh, well, we'll go farm, let's go farm more acres and pay more than the other guy down the road. And a lot of that went on. And the first money I borrowed was 12% interest. Now people are choking at 8, 7, and 8%.
Yes, I am.
Yes, I am.
I'd be in Florida if I got a chance. No. But it affected a lot back then, and today, my take on it is, a lot of it's technology, but farmers are no different than any other business out there. They find easier ways to do it, ways to be more efficient. I mean, that's brought on no-till, where we don't till. Brian and those guys, they don't till hardly any ground. I spread some manure. I like to loosen the ground back up after we and incorporate the manure into the soil. But Rob's right. We used to make 2-3 passes across the field, and now a lot of times guys are planting in one pass and spraying in 1 or 2 passes and combining. I mean, they're making 4 passes a year across the field instead of 4 in the spring. And that allows you to cover more acres in a given day and farm more acres. I'll touch on one thing in Delaware County. 10 years ago, we were farming 3,000 acres. The other 1,000 that we don't rent today is all south of 36 and it's all houses.
Yeah.
I mean, development's putting a squeeze on everybody on this panel. I mean, even the Radnor area is starting to see it too. I mean, it's.
Hey, Doug, I remember when I first came here as an extension, it helped you move down to what is now the Polaris Mall. You were farming that ground at that time. That would have been early. I know. I should have known better.
Yeah, we're not one.
Why didn't you and I buy something between here?
Because then you couldn't have come to the panel tonight. That would not have been good. Let's talk about the technology. Cameron, talk about what kind of technology you guys are using today.
Well, they haven't touched on it yet, but they actually had it easy at one time, and that was chemical programs. So Roundup came around, and Roundup could kill everything. It would kill grasses, it would kill anything, and that's all you guys pretty much mixed in your tanks, right? Am I wrong? Pretty much Roundup?
Not the 70s, no.
70s, it was
Now the chemicals that we use, we have to put about 20 different chemicals just to kill a ragweed. With that being said, a lot of drone technology now. You guys might see a lot. You guys are going to see a lot more drones flying and spraying in fields, just because we're having to make a lot more passes to control weeds. Just like the Dust Bowl and different practices like they're saying, no-till, minimal tillage, vertical tillage. We're realizing that, well, just like spraying stuff, if you don't kill it, it's going to come back even worse. So with technology of just spraying stuff, we're going to see a lot more drones, and the government has put a lot more regulations on what we can do and can't do with spraying stuff, especially with the watershed going up to lake areas, we all know. So that's a little bit of technology that you see, just flying technology.
Flying, so we're going to see things coming over.
GPS.
Tell them how you take a nap while you're planting.
I'm taking a nap whether I am or I'm not. I'm certain his brother. No, but I'm sure everybody in the audience familiar with the GPS, but that I put on my little notes here, but it's actually GPS everything, isn't it? It doesn't matter what it is, everything's tracked just like it is in all of our lives, which it's actually, I guess, a blessing, but it can kind of be a curse in one sense because somebody you don't want to track them could track you as well. But we do have unlimited amount of data if we can figure out what to do with it on the farm and apply fertilizers back to those spots and all. It's still interesting to look at those yield maps and improve on them.
When I saw the Leadership Delaware panel, they were talking about the fact that you could, I think it was when you were combining, you could tell the soil, you could tell the yield, you could tell whether or not it was enough water and all that kind of stuff.
Here, it does all that, and it's just coming out, but now the combine will take an image ahead of where you're going to combine, has cameras on it. They're telling us this is actually just starting to come out at John Deere, but it sees ahead of before it even harvests from an image that would have produced maybe 2 weeks before, so you get maximum efficiency out of the combine. And then it gets so dusty, like Doug and I are talking on the cameras, they default, the cameras are due, that's what they're telling us. They're looking at the crop and the foliage probably, but then it defaults back to the GPS satellite images, one program at Deere that you could buy it, but it's in its infancy. But if it's in its infancy, that means we'll be running, 10 years or something. So
Wow.
see how it works, but just something to talk about technology.
I mean, you used to fertilize a 100-acre field. You'd go out there and put 200 pounds of this and 100 pounds of that, and just, we're farming literally almost on a square inch, if not a square foot basis. Technology doesn't come free either. And, we do what's called grid sampling. I'm sampling, I'm not quite down on the 1 and 2 acre grids, but I do soil types, and there'll be 5 or 6 soil types in the field. What we call yield zones is how we've labeled them. But, I revert back to the hog business. There are certain things, we have domesticated pigs for 70 to 80 years. You still cannot fool Mother Nature. There are certain things, they don't like to breed in August and September because they didn't want to fair pigs in January and February. And there's been countless scientists come out with drugs and shots, and I've learned a couple tricks over the last 40 years, and it's go out and shell some brand new corn. It's the fresh crop. There's nothing wrong with what you're feeding them. It's not moldy, it's not bad corn. I tell everybody it's like when you're not even thinking about popcorn, but if you smell popcorn popping, like at a basketball game, I'll tell my wife I'm going to go get a bottle of water and use the restroom, and I come back with a bottle of water and a bag of popcorn. The aroma. But yeah, the technology is unlimited. There's technology for the hog barns. If that barn gets too hot, too cool, lets me know on my iPhone. We don't track water pressure, but you can, some of the larger farms that are a good bit larger than ours, they're tracking water pressure and temperature and airflow. And of course, we have all our buildings. My dad was one of the first guys to move all his hogs inside in a controlled environment in 1969. There was no other environmentally controlled confinement systems in Ohio.
Wow.
And he designed them himself, and the technology just took off from there. But it's so much better for the animals. We heat the barns in the wintertime, and we cool the barns in the summertime.
Put some sand out for a beach in the winter so that they can.
It's actually a nice place to work on a really cold day.
Cameron, you talked about the weeds, and that the weeds keep coming back. I mean, I know that weeds are a problem, but is there something like, because you don't have Roundup and you can't just kill everything, is that why the weeds seem to be a problem now?
They're just intolerant. I mean, they get stubborn and they don't want to die. So, but that's where farmers, we have to become chemists at times, and we have to, rely on our extension offices like OSU and different ones to put out data in order to kill a certain weed. There's so many different weed species out there, we have to look and see, okay, what's going to kill that one specific weed. And with that technology, really it's like social media. Social media, farmers, we were used to not kind of being on our own farms. But farming is so diverse. There's so many avenues to get to a crop and to harvest a crop. And no farm's alike. Every farm is different. Even if it's a family farm and you have brothers farming with you or dads and sons, you're not going to agree on anything. You're going to say, well, I want to do it this way. Well, no. And but you're going to come to a conclusion. But just in the recent years, social media and just different platforms have given us a better understanding of what we can do to benefit our farms. We might not agree with the data, but we have data that that we can use for sure.
So what's happened to the cattle farms around here?
It's not profitable.
It takes too much ground.
Okay.
In general, that's true. We currently do freezer beef. We have 50 cows that calve every year. And those cows are in a specially designed barn. And similar to with the pigs, by having them in a controlled environment, there's curtains that go up and down. They have free access to water that's not frozen. They have feed in front of them. We can come up with the right hay forages. We can calculate what their nutrition is. We have formulas for how we mix the nutrition for the cattle. And we have vaccines. I know vaccines got a bad rap recently in the U.S., but on the farm, we appreciate the opportunity. We have to make choices about what vaccines we use and have those available to us. Growing up, one of my jobs was feeding the baby calves. And I remember thinking how horrible it was if I lost a baby calf. But that happened, and it happened, it seems like fairly often, but I don't know what the actual numbers were back then. But now people raise baby calves and they can have a less than 1% fatality rate on 500 baby calves. And so technology's also helped in the cattle world. On the dairy side, it's amazing to me some of the research that they've done. One of the things they found is the cows like to drink running water. So a lot of dairy farms put in what they called rivers. As the cows came out of the parlor, they could drink running water. They timed the lights. I was up at my brother's farm one night looking at my cows, and all of a sudden the lights went off. And I said, what happened? He said, the lights went off. And I said, can we turn them back on? He said, no. He said, they're on a computer. The cows do best with 6 hours of dark every day. So the barns were all set up in time, so the lights went off and got the cows 6 hours of darkness every day. So there's so much research out there in how we do the things. I think one of the big things to me that's different from back in the 70s to now, I remember going to school and people talking about dumb farmers. A lot of people thought farmers were dumb. I'm here to tell you there's not a single dumb farmer in the county, because these guys and the young ladies who farm in Delaware County have to stay on top of the costs. They have to stay on top of the options for how they can do a better job. The competition for ground, the competition for income, competition for land is pretty intense. And I will guarantee you every one of the people who's currently farming is constantly looking at how we can do better.
How do you guys
Very well put.
deal with it? Like you were talking about the tractor cost before, and it was $25,000 and now it's $200,000. How are you guys dealing with those kind of price increases on the equipment that you need to function to run these farms? That's a big change from
The bank is my best friend.
Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, specifically for like my husband and I, right? We are more younger and just getting in, right? So it's a lot more of having that operating loan, being sure that we have those relationships with our banking institutions, farm credit, ag credit, insert local bank, whatever community bank you might talk about. But being sure that you have those relationships that you can kind of trust and lean on them when you do need some of that operating loan or land cost or whatever like that. We only have 5 years left on our dirt payment, so I'm very excited to, I guess, maybe buy more dirt. I don't know. Anyway, so just being sure that you have those connections and opportunities that you can reach out to them.
Okay.
She mentioned purchasing the farmland or whatever, and I think guys over me, but I might have caught the tail end of that, but it does truly feel like it's different here recently because dad's age and all, they would actually buy that land, and they could actually in 10 years feel like you could pencil that out, and it would, the farm would pay for itself. And it does not feel that way anymore if you don't have capital and source from another angle. And that's not just Delaware with our infrastructure problems here. It really has changed a lot. It's about like buying, you're just kind of buying and hoping it goes up because the revenue off of it is minimal. It's especially depending on weather, but even that, it's not like it used to be there. There's a lot of competitors.
And you're competing with developers building housing developments as well as other people wanting to buy the land for work.
Even in the Midwest, though, it's just such a different feel. It's just $15,000 and $20,000 on something that's going to generate $500, $300 a year. So you can do the math and what the return is, and that's not just a novel. So it's a tough thing to navigate. It's a different day. Whether it'll go back, I think everybody up here, we hope it goes back.
Yeah, I mean,
Never seen it go back.
I don't know about the 80s. I don't know about the 80s, but in the 90s and 2000s, there was literally investment groups buying farm ground because it was paying more than, if they had $1 million in the bank or whatever, it was a better return than what they could get at the bank. And Brian's right. You don't pay $15,000 an acre for something that might make you $500. I don't know what that's a tick over 3%. You do better than that on a CD or anything else at the bank. And as far as the equipment, I think I would say the age of equipment is getting, an average is getting older. They still break down and the parts are not cheap, but I mean, we put $50,000 into a tractor that if I would have traded it off, well, let's see, if I had traded it off, they'd have probably given me $50,000 and I'd have had to spend, $200. I said the $50,000 we spent was about equal to one or 2 years payments on a new one. And I'm hoping this tractor is going to last for several more years, which I'm confident it will. But the inflation has affected everything on the farm, just like it's affected all you people. I mean, we buy $3 million worth of feed a year from the feed company, and the corn and the beans have come down. Those are the two primary ingredients in hog feed, and you think, boy, the price of feed should be lower, and it is. It's all the vitamins, minerals. They're paying the truckers more. Their new trucks, if they bring it to us on, cost more money. Their electric bill's higher. Their insurance bill's higher. I mean, it isn't any different than the average consumer. Everything that we purchase has, if not doubled in price, it's close to it.
Yeah. My grandfather was a small farmer up in Richland County, and he had a tractor, and the combine was pulled behind. And I can't see, driving down through Delaware County, I don't know that I've seen a tractor pulling a combine. It's now the combine. Yeah, and looks pretty comfy in there. I'm like, I'd like to have a ride in one of those things one day. That looks kind of fun. What other kinds of things have you seen as changes, Rob?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. When we talk about the increased equipment costs and stuff, that's a little bit of what's driving, the farm getting bigger. We need to because we sell a commodity, unless you're doing direct marketing, direct church, or whatever, you want to spread that over more acres. So we're seeing more of that. I think the technology part of it's going to be very interesting. And I was at a conference here last week, and we talked about these autonomous vehicles, about maybe running smaller equipment, just running more of it. Right now we're running a 18-row planter or whatever. If one row breaks down, you're down. But if you run 18 one-row planters, exaggerate here, one breaks down, you can still run the other 17. So I think there's going to be a lot of changes like that coming on that we can't even think about. Cameron is so lucky. He's going to be in, me and Doug and Mary, we had a great time farming and entertaining. Cameron and Brian and Jackie have not even. I mean, the changes they'll see will be exponentially more than what we've seen.
Right.
And it's going to be exciting to do it.
I'm glad
And-
anything is it's
yeah,
exciting.
it is for me. Look back.
It's terrifying for me.
Yeah, but it's exciting to see what we can do once again from a production standpoint and really being able to feed the world. And you know, we're losing farmland, but right now we're able to make up for it with the technology. Hopefully that'll still be the case, and we won't lose the farmland as much. But you know, I think there's a lot of you know, unknowns right now, and it'll be probably a completely different system than we see right now.
40 years ago, I was asked if there'd be farms in Delaware County in another 20 years because everybody was talking about how Delaware County was the fastest growing county east of the Mississippi River. I answered them that day with, of course there will be, and they will continue to look different and change. And I would say that again today. There'll be farms here for a long time. Many of these families have bought the ground, they have the infrastructure in place, and this is what they love to do. They will have to continue to make judgments and decisions. And it's going to be exciting and scary both, Cameron, probably. Because they may go to different kinds of crops. Maybe we'll be growing more hemp and hops in Delaware County. I don't know. Maybe we'll be growing more Christmas trees or more vegetables. Maybe we'll just do more single row corn planters running around autonomously up and down the acreage that the farmers own. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I do know farmers have been very inventive and creative and intelligent about making constant adaptations. And I think because they love the farming life, they're going to continue to do that for a long time into the future.
I think she hit the nail on the head, right? If you look at your sheet there, nursery crops were not reported 50 years ago. I can tell you they weren't reported 15 years ago, right? But now they're reporting in as a yearly total of $29.9 million in agricultural sales. Nursery crops, and that does include Christmas trees, right? I heard that one. Christmas trees. That's what kind of clued me in right there. But
Right.
but it's just diversifying and being able to compete in the market.
Don't think people are gonna stop eating.
Yeah.
How has the role of the U.S. Department of Agriculture changed in your terms over the last 50 years, and what's the best thing they can do to help farmers today?
In my opinion, one of the best things that they can do is they got to have our back and they got to protect us. If that takes litigation or something, because if there is an upset neighbor, which they are, I say 98 people out of 100 are great, enjoy being around them, but whatever the situation, there's always a couple out of 100 that actually can be very challenging. And obviously if they do get litigation for just doing the basic things, if you want to trim limbs or something, do our day-to-day activities. So I know I've talked to legislators, and you don't want it to come to that, but the laws are there. We need to make sure that we get the laws to back us up there to allow us to continue doing what we're doing. But it truly gets tougher. It's something we see in the last 10 years. It's always somebody calling and complaining to the point where you basically have to get a sheriff deputy out there because they won't listen to reason. Or you give up your freedom.
Let's do a quick, the future, and then we'll get to questions. What do you see? You've seen drones flying around, which really kind of scares me. Having these things flying overhead, spraying things, and there's nobody in the planes. That kind of scares me. What other kinds of things do you guys see for the future of farming 10, 15, 20 years down the road?
You won't see us in the equipment anymore. It'll be all autonomous. We'll be sitting with our iPads in our houses, watching the equipment do all the work.
That's not fun.
Well, you said 10 years, that's already here.
Yeah, that's true.
That's already here.
Yeah.
We just can't afford it. So,
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we've already tested autonomous vehicles in Delaware County, so.
Will the tractors and those kind of things all go to electric rather than combustion engines?
Well, remember, they just patented JCB, a hydrogen engine that's working in Europe right now.
Okay.
So there'll be alternative fuels. I don't know about electricity, that's going to come out on top, but there are several vying for it.
Okay. What else do you see?
I don't know how AI will affect even animal production, but the amount of
Which AI are you talking about?
artificial intelligence.
Just making sure.
I already used the other.
Just making sure.
All our pigs are artificially inseminated. She worked on home farm, and her dad worked for me, so. But the AI technology, I mean, I tell my kids I'm too old for a computer. When I was in college, the professors didn't even know how to work them. The guy, our main professor, I went to Ohio State, and he said, there's 2 computers over there in the corner. So when the class was over, did you really want to go play around with a computer, or did you want to head to one of the bars? You can tell what I did.
And now you.
My dad passed away in 2018, and he knew his way around a computer better than I did because he had time to spend with it. I mean, I'm carrying a computer in my pocket. And my wife and 2 employees have been texting me while I've been up here. They're all going home for the night now, but I just think artificial intelligence is gonna, tell us what the temperature of that animal is. It's probably gonna diagnose sickness quicker. I don't know how it's all gonna affect, the crop production side, but I don't think there's gonna be a downside to it. I take a different approach. I always used to marvel at what my grandfather, born in 1898, what he saw from 1898 to 1985, and then my dad was born in 1924 and lived to 2018, and I'm thinking, but what I'm going to see and what I've already seen in my 66 years, I think rivals kind of what, there's nothing that rivals when they went from horses to tractors and cars. I mean, that was probably the biggest step that any generation or 2 generations. I mean, my dad started out a young man behind a team of horses. So, but they put the first man on the moon when I was 10 years old, and if I live another 10, we might see somebody on Mars. Who knows?
Yeah. What else? What other kind of things, Brian?
I'll put the word unfortunately in front of it, but probably consolidation in the industry. Every industry sees that, but like Cameron mentioned, we can't afford it. I mean, there's only one way you can do that if the technology's there, and that'll probably be with more volume. Basically, the livestock industry kind of dictates that. They're about 20 years ahead all the time. If you see what's going to happen, whether it's birds or hogs and all that, and it'll be a slower, probably on the grain side, 'cause it's more intricate, I would say, but still, it's going to kind of have to be that way, I believe.
Wow.
Yeah, 90% of our animals leave the state. There's only one small, what I would call small, 1,000 head a day harvested hog plant in Ohio. There used to be, in 75, there was probably 10 or 12 that harvested at least 1,000 head a day. But there's plants, there's a plant in Virginia that does 30,000. The 2 plants that I sell to in Indiana, they harvest one harvests 10,000 hogs a day and the other one 15,000.
Wow, that's a lot.
But the hog industry, I mean, I don't know what all the numbers are in the grain industry, but 20% of the pork raised in this country leaves this country. Mexico's our biggest buyer. Every one of us up here is a little bit nervous about the tariffs, but I'm confident that it'll all shake out in the long run for the good of the country.
We hope. Barry?
Some of us remember the grain embargo that happened a few years back.
That was 75.
Yeah.
That's what caused the 80s debacle.
Right. And so I think, to me, probably one of the biggest factors that's going to drive the future is the global marketplace. And especially as we see more and more development and taking over farm production opportunities here, we're going to rely on income from imports from other places as well. And I think that global interaction is huge in many ways in terms of as technologies evolve and develop and research. I was in Chile a few years ago, and they had a seed plant there where they were continuing to develop the genetics in the seed corn. And one of the advantages was if they did research in the southern hemisphere, in the northern hemisphere, they grew 2 crops a year. So we could dramatically increase the genetics faster by doing that. And I think that kind of impact is going to continue to happen. I think it's also going to be the consumer is more and more removed from what agriculture is all about. And I think that's going to continue to create challenges for us, sharing the roadways, things like that. But I want to tell you, we've talked a lot about food tonight. It's food, it's fiber, it's fuel, it's a lot of other things. From cows, for example, some of the things that go into your cosmetics, your adhesives, your paints, some of those come from the cows when we process them. I found out at the dentist office for people who get implants, sometimes the bovine bone is preferred over cadaver bone for the dental implants. Recently, there was a pig that raised a kidney inside of his body that they transplanted into a human being, and that person is surviving. I think we're going to continue to see development of those kinds of applications in the health world from agriculture. And I think there's unbelievable possibilities at this point in time. And Cameron's going to be around to see more than I will. I also think in terms of health and safety for farmers, that's going to be a big improvement as you're doing less of the physical work that we used to do. One of my friends was crushed by a combine header. And I did agricultural health and safety for 20 years, looking at the fatality rates in farming. Now, one of our big issues is mental health, and we're working really hard to start to address that concern because of the suicide rate among some of our agricultural producers and our agricultural populations. So I think the safety, the physical safety, is less of an issue for us now. But I think some of those stressors and the mental health issues are going to be things that we really need to look at a little bit more closely.
When my grandfather was threshing, I guess that's what they were doing. My uncle came running down to my grandmother who was cooking food for all the farmers. And he said, Mom, you got to come up here. There's fingers all over the barn. And he got his hand caught in the thresher. And yeah, so safety is absolutely something that I would think you don't get down your iPad. You don't have to worry about that. Anything else that you?
Yeah, touch on what Nara's saying. Actually, statistically, being a farmer is more dangerous than being a police officer in America, which is kind of crazy to think about, especially the climate that law enforcement's been dealing with for a while. But I think the stereotype farmer that we kind of foresee as far as work ethic, I think farmers are very hardworking. We don't have a day off unless we want our hogs to die or cattle to die. But I think we'll have a lot more diversity. When I say that, I think we're gonna have more young people. Because as Doug said, he can't work an iPad or a computer very well. Neither can I, believe it or not. But my kids can do a lot better than I can. I think we'll have a lot more young people help with artificial intelligence, programming. Yeah, we can have technology, but if we don't know how to use it, what good is it? So I know, we hate changing phones because we're worried that we know how to use it. So I think with younger people hopefully coming in the ag industry, because right now there's a gap. I think I'm one of the younger ones in this whole county still farming. But is there a succession plan for these farms? I don't know. And if there isn't, it's going to consolidate or it's going to be sold. Your small family farms are kind of a thing of the past. And all of a sudden, when grandma and grandpa die and they have 150 acres, then it goes to the kids. If the kids don't want to farm, what do they do with that land? Either they cash rent it or they want to sell it. Now, do you sell it to a farmer that they know, or do they go after the almighty dollar? And right now in this county, it's the almighty dollar because, there's a lot of people wanting to build homes and different things. Well, if I can get $35,000, $100,000 an acre, or sell it to a farmer for $6,000, well, I want to get the most money on my. Who cares what grandma and grandpa did to get that ground? It's my money now, and I want the most out of it.
Yeah.
So that's what we're dealing with right now on the ground.
Jackie, talk about, you've got some statistics on acreage now, acreage then. and the size of farms and stuff.
Yeah, so as you can see from 1975 to 2023, which is our most current data that we can pull, 2024 should be out, I think, Rob, another 2 months.
Yeah.
So you can see we've lost just about 100,000 acres of farm ground in 50 years, just shy of 50 years. And our average size of our farm has went up, right? So we were 146 acres per farm, and now our average is 180 acres per farm. So our pig numbers are not even reported anymore, and they do that because if they do report them, they will give away the identity of who has those pigs.
How many Doug has? So
I would say you're the only commercial operation in the county. Yep. Yeah. Sheep are not reported anymore. All cattle are 2,000 head, and you can see that was 19,000 head back in the day. And milk cows are 300 instead of 3,000. Mary, how many dairies do we have?
There are at least 5 still milking
Okay.
in Delaware County, and there might be a 6th.
Okay.
I'm not sure whether they're still milking.
Okay, that's what I had it down to 3, but I knew that you would have a better answer for that. So that are still actively milking cows, which is hard, right? We all talk about how hard work it is, but I feel that dairy farmers will earn that trophy. But what I really wanted to point out was some of these like acreages of crops, right? So our corn acres have decreased 10,000. Our soybean acres have actually went up quite a bit. Our wheat acres have decreased dramatically. Oats, not even reported, not even thought about being reported for multiple years now. And then hay acres are not reported at all. But when we kind of take it over to the yield, we've already talked about a lot of the genetic diversity and whatnot that we've had that has been able to, that technology that's been able to help us, right? Doug said that if you got 100 bushel corn, you were doing good. Our average in 75 was 86 bushels per acre. And apparently that was a rough year. 74 was a little bit better.
you don't remember that?
I don't remember that. 74 was a little bit better, but 86 bushels per acre, and now our last year, or our 2023 average for corn was 194. Right?
Things are changing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and you can kind of see there some other yields that we've got represented, and you can just see the technological advances that we have just in genetics, and to kind of get some of those better crops that we have.
Very cool. Very cool. Questions from the audience? or
Karen,
comments?
before you get
Yeah.
any questions, let's finish up with the USDA question.
Oh, okay.
I thought that was a good question. Brian did a nice job with it, but one of the things that I see that USDA can really help us with is this idea that to keep the insurance programs that we have. Because of the uncertainty with weather and really trade and a lot of different things that they need to do, that insurance program, either it's or through the government program or through the Farm Bill or through some other government program, the insurance, the ability to have insurance on crops and livestock is pretty, even the nursery stock is pretty important right now.
Very cool. Very cool. Jan, you had your hand.
Can we hear about storage and transportation of grains? How can you afford to have big storage buildings, and how much goes out to the Mississippi and down out of the country, things like that?
When I was growing up,
They're looking.
I can tell you, we built a lot of grain bins when I was growing up. And our job was to put the nuts and the bolts together and the little sticky piece to make the metal stick together and hold that corn securely. So it's a pricing conundrum to figure out when you should store and when you shouldn't. And I'm going to let Brian take it from here.
I'm in the same conundrum you are. No, there's
Price always goes up the day after you sell.
Yeah. We text each other and say, wait, because I sold. There is, as you notice, driving down the road from here to Nebraska, there's a lots more on-farm storage. And we call them surge tanks at home, because last year, 23, you would have been better off just to harvest it and sell it. You don't know that at the time, but you've got to the elevators typically get full, and they're still full basically. They're dealing with volume, so grain bins basically are a necessity to get the crop in a timely fashion. Probably even though it's Delaware County, continue to see more grain bins. They're actually a pain in the keister, to be honest. I mean, you'd rather not have them because you got to paint them. There's always something broke down, but they are a blessing in the fall there to be able to get a crop under roofs. And transportation, our farm though, but even yet tonight, but I mentioned the markets are farther, but those guys are back hauling products from, some of them go to Michigan, but they want to pick that up at their schedule, so you try and make it available about any time. But yeah, grain basically gets hauled out every other day of the year for us. Is try and fit the market. We're also trying to fit the trucker's schedule.
Wow.
So you're selling on future contracts too. So that's
Yeah.
the other thing that we don't maybe talk all the time. So we'll sell per month, right? Like my father-in-law just contracted 20,000 bushels of corn for March, right? So he could have contracted that back March of last year. He could have contracted that 2 years in advance, right? So we sell on future contracts as well. So that's kind of part of the reason why we need the grain bins, is so that we can store that to do that. And why the conundrum.
Just kind of keep moving itself around, doesn't it?
Yeah, in a perfect world, the futures contract should tell you what they want you to do with it, but sometimes they're just doing it.
Just kidding.
And we bought some of our products go to Egypt. So the DDG's out of Poet and Marion. That's cornmeal. They're loading those up in containers a year or two ago, and those are going to Egypt. A lot of our soybeans go to China. And if China rejects it, then it goes to the Koreans, and they buy it. So our crops could end up definitely in foreign waters pretty fast. So in Delaware County.
Very cool. Other questions? Yeah, Steve.
Well, two questions. First, is somebody named Gene Reed here tonight? Okay. His email keeps coming back undeliverable when I send out links to the live stream. He's supposed to be here. GMO. You don't really hear of that in the news anymore. I haven't heard somebody say GMO for a long time. Is that still a thing?
Well, I always allude to what Cameron started saying when we were talking about the wheat situation. The more organic, the better, but that isn't going to work for us. We actually had an organics part of a farm, but the real thing when you think about genetically modified, the weeds did that. They adapted naturally. In the beans or the corn, probably, there'd be 1 million kernels and 2 would survive, but the beans have adapted to the Roundup, or the weeds. So actually when they talk about that, it's mutating and all, the non-GMO is still a big part. There's decent premiums, $2 to $4 a bushel on the beans in particular. The corn has cross-pollinated so much because the pollination blows in the wind. It's really getting tough for them to get a dedicated non-GMO product, what they've told us the last couple of years.
And a lot of foreign countries that used to not accept GMO grains, they do now. Japan still is probably the largest one that likes certain, I've been told certain non-GMO soybeans make better looking or tasting tofu. Don't ask me. I have eaten it, but it's not on my daily diet. But I do. I mean, my dad went on a trade mission to China. And I've explained this to a lot of people. I said, I can produce pork, or we, an American, could produce pork cheaper than any other country in the world. But every pound of pork that I send to China, they put a 25 or 50% tariff on it. And they do that to protect their own Chinese pig industry. But when Dad and the trade mission, they went in butcher shops, they were in restaurants, they toured farms, they got wined at 9 by the Prime Minister. That's like a 20-minute story, but the Prime Minister ate better than they did, I'll tell you that. But, the people actually preferred they're not on the same diet over there. They actually preferred the American pork, but, because of the price differential, not all the people could afford it. And And that is my soapbox on trade is I just want a level playing field. I'll compete with any farmer in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, Brian and I really aren't competing with each other unless we're standing in front of an auctioneer.
Then we might as well go to the back of the line now.
Yeah.
It's fun to talk.
There'll be a third guy, which is a developer.
Somebody online doing it.
That's happening. But
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more of a statement of recognition, but his tailoring on his comments. First of all, I think we've gotten too far away from where we were and where we are now, which is the American farmer. It's the heart of civilization. It's the strength of this nation. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and the Continental Army were foremost farmers. The revolution was started on taxes on produce coming from Britain that we didn't produce here. Was tea and sugar, and I feel maybe more should be done to recognize the importance of farmers who do it better with less, more than anybody in the world.
Yeah.
So I think,
Yeah.
and that's, if we lose them, we lose the greatness of this nation.
You guys need a good marketing group to market.
we
Seriously.
try.
Yeah.
The
seriously.
U.S. used to have a positive balance of trade because of our agricultural production. The latest information I saw, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, the last 3 years that's been reversed. And I think that's unfortunate because we can produce a lot and we can produce it well and we can produce it in a safe and efficient and effective manner.
Well, in the 30s, there was a lot of farm bills because of the Depression, and there was a lot of recognition of the farmers with Farm Bureau, Farmers Institute, and all that. There's because people were out of food, and they finally found out that food doesn't come from Kroger; it comes from the farmer.
Very true.
Well, some of the foreign countries don't have the regulation, the EPA regulations, which I'm not against them, don't. But they're, Brazil is using the same chemicals we're using, and they're half the price because they don't have to have an EPA registration label on them for Brazil, but yet, and part of the grain embargo of 75, 76 is the reason now Brazil raises more soybeans than the United States does. China invested billions, if not trillions of dollars into the deforestation of Brazil to get a more reliable trade partner because we were using grain as a weapon. And I don't really look at what we're doing today as a weapon. I think I'm hoping that they're going to use it to balance the playing field instead of, using us for a pawn. That remains to be seen. But my thing about the USDA, there used to be more employees of the USDA than there was farmers. I don't know how that can be good.
Nothing personal, but probably not. Yeah, Roger.
How many people are making a living off farming today compared to 50 years ago? How many individual humans?
Those are usually people.
I think it's less than 1%, right, of our.
0.6% was the last percent I saw.
If I remember right, when I was in college, one farmer created 18 jobs, I think it was, and today that number's like 46 or in the 50s. I mean, I don't know what that, but I mean, okay, I'm looking at this data here. There was 1,500 farms supposedly in 75. I mean, there was, but my guess there was probably 500 full-time farmers in Delaware County at that time, and today you got 728 farms.
A lot more condominiums.
I think that number. I think that number might be 100 farmers or less. for Delaware County? I don't know. I don't have any idea.
And the
It could
average
be.
age of the farmers in their 60s probably.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. You guys are bringing the age down, age average down.
Yeah, but like,
a little bit.
I mean,
.001.
Cameron also has another job, right? And I obviously have another job, right? So it, like that, to get that sole income straight from farming, it's
You'd have to be crazy to be a farmer because farming's the only job where you can, your input cost, to put a crop out, you can't control the cost. We sell stuff, can't control the selling cost. There is nothing really a farmer can control. We have to buy the crop for what they sell it to us for, but we're not going to have a crop. And then we sell it whenever the market tells us we can sell for maybe a profit. So.
It makes you question whether Mary's right about this smart farmer theory.
Yeah. You have to be happy and crazy.
Buy that.
Yeah, but that's a good thing about Delaware County is, you can bring a son or daughter in. They don't have to be a full-time farmer because around us we have opportunity for off-farm income, and that can be good and bad. But the good part is you got two sons that want to come back and farm, and you're not going to get many more acres. If they can get a job somewhere else and still farm, they can still have that lifestyle. And to me, that's the ultimate. Is this idea of being around your family and having them be part of the operation.
This is kind of a minor aside to the theme you were talking about extra jobs. But I know a lot of farmers around Union. My farm roots are in Union County, but I know cousins and friends and almost everyone that's still staying farming, somebody takes that outside job to get the health insurance for the family.
Benefits are huge.
Yeah, there's actually a current bill at the State House. There's actually a current bill at the State House to allow Farm Bureau to do new health plans to make it more feasible for farmers to remain on the farm full time. It's, I think, House Bill 99 and Senate Bill 100. But that's a current issue that we're looking at, and it's a really important one because many farm families do have somebody working off the farm, and that complicates the family life in some ways to have somebody working off the farm versus they're at the farmstead all the time. My one son is full-time on the farm. His wife does work off the farm for the schools.
Dave.
In 1940, 50% of the population were involved in farming. Today, less than 2% is involved in farming.
Wow, that's a big decrease. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
If you could comment on the trends in the climate. I know the climate statistically has been becoming more extremes. You're seeing more extremes, more droughts, more heavy rainfalls, and I was wondering how you have dealt with that in the past and what you're looking at in the future to kind of deal with this extra uncertainty that's coming.
More grass waterways in the water. It has been a serious problem. We don't have corn roots. That could be a big chunk, but it's beyond that. It doesn't matter, but it's a factor. Not a whole lot changed in 40 years, but in the last 5 years, it's been a lot of erosion. So you do try. There is tools now that can help you do it, but yeah.
Well, I think the genetic improvement's been amazing. If you guys remember back in '88, we had a huge drought. It was really similar to what we had this year. But in '88, we were talking, 50 bushel corn, and this year we're talking 150 bushel as bad. So we're battling with that. But tornado season now in Ohio is in February and March, like last year, right? So we do have these weather extremes, and actually me and Jackie are working on with our climatologist. And actually, I've been talking to Doug a little bit about it. What changes do we have to make to kind of look at this? First of all, that's one of the reasons we have bigger equipment because our window to get things harvested and planted is shrinking. We're seeing that, and we're seeing more weather extremes one way or the other, hot, cold. I know myself as an agritourism person, we had 90-degree days 1st of October. I never saw that when we started back in '94. It was always cold. So we're definitely getting something with that. But it's a lot of things we're looking at. Technology, once again, to kind of speed that up. And Cameron, you've probably seen as much as anybody is this idea that these shrinking winds we have to get crops out and stuff, especially if you work part-time.
Yeah, I mean, these guys talking about, planting with a 6-row corn planter and getting a big day in, we're on big equipment now, and it's like, man, we're barely getting the stuff in before the rains come, and we're weeks, away from even getting the crops done. But the genetic, and what Rob was saying about the genetics, I mean, they have a corn crop now that's like 5 foot tall for high wind environments. So, the Dakotas, they get super high winds, and they'd have corn, laying down, and it'd be a mess. And now the genetics, they have a short corn crop, it's miniature, but it still produces a pretty good size ear that they're working on just because of high wind environment. And then once again, a drought year, your guys' grasses are turning brown, and you can about light a match and burn our grasses, but somehow you look out in the fields and they're still green. You're like, how is this possible? Genetics keeps us alive.
Wow. Those little things won't do well for corn mazes.
No. Maybe for the kids. Yeah,
For me, I can see where I was going.
Yeah.
Other questions? Yeah.
Speaking of climate change, does anybody wish that maybe the government would have taken it a little more seriously 40 years ago when it didn't cost as much to aim in this direction as it's going to cost when they finally hit the tipping point and say, well, we're going to have to do something? I'm not just talking about farming. I'm talking about the disasters all over.
I think that we all kind of think we should have been here watching the signs and doing things a little bit faster than we are. I have hope in technology that maybe technology is going to help us get out of this situation.
Well, all of our engines nowadays have the DEF fluid in them, so we can literally shut our barn doors and start our tractors inside of our shops and run them all day, and we'll be fine. Air going into them is supposedly cleaner than what's, or the air coming out of them are cleaner than what's going into them. So that's what they tell us anyhow. So
don't want to try.
I'm not going to put my face up to the exhaust, but they say that. So
good idea.
I mean, agriculture, we're the first ones really to have the DEF systems, leading in massive equipment. And now the rest of the industry has to follow us basically. So in a sense, we're cleaning the air for everybody.
I'm interested to see how the hydrogen type
You're
equipment
running your tractor all day. That's not cleaning the air from greenhouse gases.
The air going into it's cleaner than the air going out of or coming out of it. That's what the government tells us.
And once again, too, in agriculture, we're doing our part for carbon sequestering, and we're, in that type of thing. And there's carbon programs out there, and we've been working on that. We got a program actually on next Saturday about that. So there's a lot of stuff going on besides the scenes. And once again, it takes all of us, not just the government.
I don't know how you guys keep track of all the data that you get. I mean, that's just got to be mind-boggling as stuff comes in. Yeah.
I'm going to plug the Ashley Junior Fair. It's the 100th anniversary of the fair, which is, if you don't know anything about the Junior Fair, the 4-H combined all the agriculture groups together, and they had their own fair. If anybody wants to look at all the information on it, I got this book here, they can read through it. It did prompt the first girl to join a boys 4-H club, and she won first place.
Of course.
She won first place. She went on to become a fifth grade teacher. And actually, which is Mary Kay Pyatt, and a lot of you would know her. It also prompted, that program prompted the first FFA vice president of a newly formed FFA from Ashley, Ohio, which was Lawrence Augustine. And I could go on and on and on, but just a few examples. But this book is available, and there's a lot of interesting things.
Very cool. Thank you. Thank you. So it's time.
Not a question, but just a statement. Farmers in general are so good at building bridges. They reach out and work with everybody. Their county farm bureaus, state farm bureau, legislative officials, state reps, house reps, township officials. So we just had Ag Day at the Capitol I saw almost every county in Ohio represented at Ag Day in the Capitol, just in pictures. So it's just a great way to keep that relationship. It helps foster laws and helps protect us as well. And they're really good at reaching out.
Very cool. Yes.
So I mean, I work with old barns.
Yeah, you do.
I'm on the board of directors of Friends of Ohio Barns. I doubt if you know that the barn is the official symbol for the state of Ohio. John Kasich signed that in 2019. We lobbied hard to get that past the Senate. But to build on this point, this gentleman raised over here, we see so many congressmen praising teachers in the last 10 years and their contribution and how valuable they are. We don't see that for farmers. I'm thinking, what we need is a marketing campaign. And the Department of Agriculture, some of those people could work in that regard to promote the value of farming. I bought here at an auction at Garth's 2 big, thick volumes, The American Farmer, Earth Farming, from the 1840s. And there was a quote from George Washington saying, "It's the most noble profession known to man." I think to raise awareness, and I'll pitch this to Ken Burns. You know the Civil War series, and he's talked about everything, and he raises awareness. I've been talking to people that know Ken, and I said, we need a 6-part, 6-hour series on the American farmer. It just has not been done. It's a huge topic.
Yeah.
And when, Doug, didn't you say 90% of your hogs go out of state? 90% of the barns like this in Ohio go out of state.
Yeah.
They're being shipped out for flooring, for fireplace mantles, for all kinds of stuff. We're trying to save Ohio barns. So
thank you.
Yeah, we have an Ohio Barn Conference the 25th and 26th of April. It'll be our 25th in Canton, and we have 2 keynote speakers. One, Lindsay Cook, who is the leading American expert on Notre Dame. She's doing a whole talk on the restoration of Notre Dame. So that'll be fun to see. So anyway, if anybody's interested.
And Dan, didn't you say you were going to donate those books to the Delaware County Historical Society?
Yeah.
I can make Xerox copies of them.
Yeah. Very cool, very cool. And we are also doing a barn survey. Ms. Logan over here is heading up, and Mr. Levy back here are doing a barn survey of Delaware County, 460, how many? Tell me, don't.
500.
500 barns. And I found out that there is something called the perfect silo, not because it's gorgeous, but because Mr. Perfect made it. I'm finding out all kinds of things about this. There's 2 perfect silos in Delaware County, according to my husband. So those of you who have barns, if you see people riding down the street very slowly, taking pictures, that's probably my husband and Brent Carson or Dick Levy and some other people taking pictures of barns, and they might knock on your door and ask you for the barn story. So just be aware that they're not doing things that are illegal. They're just taking pictures of your barns. Thank you all for coming out on this blustery, cold night. Thank you all for absolutely